Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com, and this is episode 28 of Photo Critiques. And in Photo Critiques, people send me in some of their best work, and I critique each image with suggestions on how they can improve it. And today, I'm pleased to critique the work of Melvin and Rosemary. And this will be a short Photo Critiques. They sent me in 4 photos, so let's get started. This first one's a macro of the flower, and the focus is good. You want to really have a strong focus whenever you do a macro. You want it really as tight as you could make it. What I would suggest is the ISO 400 on macros, because you're trying to illustrate detail. Get your ISO as low as it could go. So if your camera goes to 100, go to 100. Some cameras just go to 200, then go to 200. Other cameras go to 50. Go to 50 if you can. So get the ISO as low as you could go. Also, on macro with flowers specifically, generally you want the light flat. Unless you're trying to show off the texture of a petal or something, then you'd have side light to show off that texture. But generally speaking, you want the light straight on. That's why ring flashes are very popular with macro shooters, especially macro shooters of flowers. So in this case, the light is coming from the left and even from the back a little bit, and it's kind of harsh. It casts these shadows in here, and it's not very attractive for the flower, to look at the flower with those shadows. So if you're photographing at a botanical garden or somewhere where there's flowers, try to get the shots of the flowers that are facing directly into the sun, so the sun is flat on the flower. Also consider getting a reflector. A reflector would help. You could reflect the light back into the flower and get rid of some of these shadows. Or you could get a diffuser, and all a diffuser is a translucent piece of fabric that lets the light through, but it diffuses it when it goes through, and you would hold that up over here so it would diffuse the light. So that's what I would say, is try to shoot so the light is flat when you're using when you're shooting flowers generally, or any macro in particular, but generally flowers. This is a nice cityscape shot. I have a couple suggestions. I'd like you to see you use a longer shutter speed. Use 1.6 seconds at f of 8. If you dialed that up to f16, I wouldn't go all the way to f22, because generally that causes diffraction, it's called, and your lens isn't as sharp at its smallest aperture. But 11 or 16 would be good to get that longer aperture, or I'm sorry, longer shutter speed. And once you had the longer shutter speed, the water would get smoothed out a lot more than it is now, and it would enhance the reflections, so everything above these lights and everything would be reflected a lot better in the water. A consequence too of using the smaller shutter speed is it would cause these lamps to get that starburst effect I talked about in previous critiques. So you'd get this flare of a star, and that enhances the photo too, and that of course would be reflected in the water also. If you can't really get a super long shutter speed because of the conditions, consider getting an ND filter. ND stands for neutral density, and all it does is let less light in through the lens to the sensor, and it doesn't affect color. At least the better ones won't affect color. They don't do anything to do any special effects. They just let less light through, and because less light is going through, you have to compensate by using either a larger aperture or a slower shutter speed. So in this case, you want to use this slow shutter speed. If you could get that shutter speed to 10-15 seconds, you'd get that water really like glass, and it would have a lot of nice reflections in it. This shot too, I would suggest longer shutter speed. You had a 4-second one here. The water still has kind of a little ripple in it, little movement in it. If you got it really slow, it would enhance these reflections a lot. 10 seconds, 15 seconds, try. The other thing is the composition itself. It's pointed up a little too much, and you've got this bottom reflection cut off almost. You don't want it perfectly symmetrical in this case. I don't think that would look right. You'd want a little more sky than you do water, but it just moved down a little bit, maybe to up in here from the top, and then you'd have that much more going down at the bottom. I think it would balance the shot a lot better. And the final shot, I think this is a black-capped night heron, possibly, can't remember. Anyways, what I love about this shot is, typically for people who don't know, when you're photographing an animal and they're looking sideways, you want the bigger part, the empty part of the frame, the way they're facing. So you don't want this bird's beak way over here. It doesn't look natural. They're looking, there's nothing over there. You want them in this case, the bird is looking to our left, so we want the bird as far to the right as it looks natural, so it's looking into the empty part of the frame. Similarly, if you had something walking through the frame or flying through the frame, you'd want them in the smaller part of the frame, so the way they're headed is into the bigger part of the frame, if that makes any sense. So they did an excellent job, Melvin and Rosemary. The bird is to the right, looking into this empty part of the frame. It looks very natural. The problem is, though, you cut off part of the feet here. Generally, I mentioned this before in critiques, if you're photographing any animal, even if it's an insect, get the entire animal in the frame. Unless, of course, you're going for a special effect, like you're photographing this bird's head, or maybe just the eye or something like that. I mean, just the beak. Of course, that's okay. But in this case, where you're photographing the entire bird, get the entire bird in the frame. So don't cut off the feet like it is now. And that's pretty much it. That's my suggestions is on those twilight shots where there's water involved, use a longer shutter speed. And if you need an ND filter to achieve that, by all means use it. It'll smooth the water out like ice and will enhance the reflections. Also, when you have street lamps or any spot lighting like that, like a spot of light, use as small as aperture as you can, no more than, I'd say, f/16. f/11 is optimum, but the smaller aperture will give you that starburst effect, that star effect on the lights, and that's a very pleasing effect to have in your shots. And finally, if you're photographing macros in general, but flowers specifically, you want the light as flat as possible. So try to take the shots of the flowers that are facing directly into the light, so the sun, light source, probably the sun, is behind you when you're shooting down on it. And if you have to, use a reflector or use a diffuser to soften the light, and it will help enhance those shots. Also, use a small an ISO as you can. If your camera goes to 50, use 50. Most cameras go to 100. Use 100 ISO on those macros because detail's important. So that's it. I'd like to thank Melvin and Rosemary for sending me in their shots. I enjoyed critiquing it. And if you guys ever want me to critique your work, you could send it in to critiques@anthonymorganti.com. I have a lot in. I'm running like 3 weeks. So if you send them in, you know it's going to take me a while to get to them, but I appreciate your patience. And I appreciate everyone who has subscribed to my YouTube channel. Thank you very much. And if you haven't, I'd really appreciate if you guys would subscribe to the channel and share the videos. That would be awesome. All right, that's it for now. Take care.